Agroecology is a new way of conceiving how food is to be produced. It is based on the idea that instead of domesticating nature, mastering it and reducing it to something simple, we should accept it is complex. We should use this complexity as an asset, and we should diversify production by combining different plants with trees, with animals, in order to reconstitute at the field level the interactions between these different elements of nature. Over the past 50 or 60 years, the tendency in the European Union has been to reward economies of scale, large-scale production, mechanization, monocultures, in the name of increasing production and efficiency. And that has been extremely damaging for the health of the soils, for the preservation of biodiversity, for even the health of consumers, because they were more and more accustomed to consuming heavily processed foods, and farmers themselves have become input providers for the agri-food processors. And it is a system that is now showing its limits, and that must be reformed significantly. And therefore, there is a mismatch between the professed intention of the successive reforms of the Common Agricultural Policy, which is to green it, to make it more environmentally sustainable, and the signals that are sent, the economic incentives that are introduced by the system of subsidies that basically reward large-scale producers. And for this reason, I think it's the Common Agricultural Policy is in need of a much more systematic reform that would reward producers, that provide environmental services, that support really the development of agro-biodiversity on European farms, but we are still very far from that vision. We have some interesting initiatives that are taken today to promote agroecology. And for example, the French law that was adopted to promote the groupement d'intérêt économique et environnemental and to support agroecological transitions is an interesting example in this regard. But the problem is you cannot simply focus on the side of production. So we need a revolution in how we eat. Gradually this is taking place. More and more parents are concerned about the health of their children. Schools are trying to provide food in school canteens that is healthier. More and more people are becoming vegetarians, or at least reducing their consumption of meat. They want something else. Agroecology should not be reduced to a series of agronomic techniques such as agroforestry, the use of leguminous plants to fertilize the soils, the use of small animals to fertilize the soils, harvesting rainwater and so on. Agroecology is also about a different relationship to food and a different way of organizing food systems. It's important to realize that agroecology is highly dependent on the local context. The local resources, the quality of the soils, the type of tree that you can grow, the type of combination of different plants that you can imagine. And therefore, it is not very easy to present agroecology on a European scale, for example, as one single recipe that should be applied everywhere.
It's possible to deal with it through different points of view. What are the scientific approach and the practices linked to agroecology? What is the social aspect? How agroecology can be taught? In Europe, each country has its own definition of agroecology. In Italy, people have used agroecology for many years. Their technical approach highlights the importance of thinking at the agricultural system level. It is also interesting to see how different stakeholders work together to develop agroecology at a higher level.
So the Italian way of doing agroecology has four many components. The first component is tradition. The second component is ecology. The third component is system thinking, and the fourth component is system practice. In Italy, we have an old academic tradition in agricultural sciences. And the first agronomy who taught in that period was Pietro Cuppari, who can be today be considered as the first proto-agroecologist. He was able to establish a theory that we can call the theory of the organic farm, where he regarded a farm as a living body. He was able to establish at least three important and main components. These components were crops, livestock, and soil. In the same way, when you consider the landscape, you can consider the landscape as a mosaic of farms. And so you can identify that between and among farms in a territory, there must be some linkages, some kind of relationships that today can be identified in the new concept of biodistricts.
The agroecological transition in Italy is very connected with the territorial organic farming development. A biodistrict or ecoregion is a territory where producers, consumers, and public administrators work together for the sustainable management of natural resources. In 2014 was held the International Network of Ecoregions, and actually in Europe we have about 20 ecoregions.
If you have to organize, according to the theory of organic farm, a kind of management of the farm, you need to increase biodiversity in several ways. It's important to understand what kind of sequence of crops can enhance the soil organic matter. You have to establish these virtual circuits in a farm. In this way you can establish sustainability at the farm level and at the field level.
Agroecology is linked to organic farming. It is also linked to the conservation of traditional skills and knowledge. In the Salas Gardens, different families grow their own food with ancient practices.
The Salas Garden have an area of 800 hectares divided into little family plots, and each piece of land is served by a source of water. Every family makes his own plot with different vegetables, and this system is a system that was used 1,000 years ago. Our work is to keep the seeds, the ancient seeds. The gardeners are making a research of all the seeds. They made a bank of fruits seeds. With this bank of fruits, what they do is every year they plant a different kind of fruit, so they can preserve different kind of apple. And in our bank, almost 90 different variety of apple, 90 pears, and more than 50 cherries, apricot, and so on. The water irrigates the grounds through a system of major and minor ditches, medieval ditches. And the farm, they just use this system with this canal that goes on the side of the plot, and they break, so they do many little canals inside the plot, inside the vegetables.
Farmers use traditional practices and installations. They are respectful of the environment and allow agroecological management of natural resources. It is also important to involve different stakeholders in agroecology and to educate them, such as producers, consumers, and so on. In Slovenia, lots of agricultural practices are traditional. During years, people work to adapt their system to the environment and to develop these practices.
In Slovenia, if we think about agroecological practices, we have a lot of traditional knowledge still practiced in the field or at the farms. And these kind of traditions are still used, especially on the part-time farms. There are small farms where farmer also works somewhere else. And they don't really use new technologies a lot because they're expensive and they're sometimes also complicated. But they use a lot of traditional approaches in managing the farm. The benefits of agroecology for Slovenia could be numerous because it would enable to formalize some traditional approaches of farming and include them into the day-to-day activity of farmers, which would be, so in this case, more sustainable. So we have, for example, good developed sustainable beekeeping approaches and activities. There is a good traditional and still active tradition of preparing some meat products on farms. We have a tradition of use of wood as a renewable source of material. And it was passed from generation to generation in this traditional way through the family or from neighbor to neighbor. This transfer was interrupted. Now we want to do it another way through formal, informal or non-formal education where the knowledges which would also be scientifically proved, would be passed to people, to interested people who would like to practice it then.
This traditional knowledge is linked to agroecology. It is important to teach it to farmers by working in cooperation with them on the evolution of the system to agroecology. Thanks to different educational ways, interested people can learn this knowledge, alternative practices and other lifestyle linked to nature. Polygon Dole is one of these educational places.
Polygon Dole, it is in municipality Polčane. It is the area only with 1.5 hectares. And on the polygon we have 3 alternative buildings. There Hobbit house with the temperature 15 degrees in whole year, and it is like our place for production, what we here produce, and like a meeting zone for the people. And this is the region of the production. Then we have greenhouse. In winter we have all our production in greenhouse only with this natural production, but important it is we used the layer. First is the wood, then is the sheep wool, and after then it is the soil. For evapotranspiration, then stay a water a lot of time there. And yurt is Mongolian house and is completely from the natural materials, wood and wool. Permaculture, it's not only the methods for producing some things for eating, but it's like planning how can you live next 10 or 20 years and how must you connect together what the nature have, it means natural potential, with your wishes. The name Polygon Dole, it's like educational polygon, because here we develop new approaches for different characteristics of soil and showed to the people how can they, with the soil, with atmosphere characteristic, with exposition and so, connect together all of these geographical characteristics to produce the eating for yourself. So knowledge about environment, it is very important, but in school it is only to understanding through information, but not from the investigation. And here we want to learn investigation environment. So we see young generation want and need to help practical experience in a real situation, and it will be, I think, like independent, self-sufficiency generation.
Thanks to the knowledge of the environment, it is possible to develop a system adapted to the natural condition and to your wishes. Practical experience and investigation develop critical mind and autonomy, so people can set in place a system to become food self-sufficient. In Lithuania, agroecology can be illustrated by the development of eco-villages. In order to change their way of life, to be more independent and self-sufficient, people create small communities living in those villages.
This place is Kardokai Eco Village. My main idea to go to live in the nature with family was to find better conditions for family. Better food, better water, better weather. Eco-villages appeared in Lithuania approximately 10 years ago, and now it's about 5 strong eco-villages. They are not big, 5 families or 7 families. All this movement is that all the families are independent and want to create their sustainable life in the nature. There are 13 plots in our village. Every family had from 1 hectare to 2.5 hectares. The straw bale house is quite simple. It is carcass wooden house, full filled with straw bale inside as isolation material. All construction and isolation is closed by plaster made from the clay and gravel. We use permaculture principles in our garden. We do mixed seeding of the plants, and all the grass what we cut around the house in our yard we use for the garden nurturing. And we find a lot of new things what we can do. Take experience to build own house, take experience new activity. So it's place for realization.
In those places, people try new practices like permaculture. They adapt their practices to the environment in order to produce with the nature. On a different scale, organic farming is developing in Lithuania. Farmers like Valentina Genis set up agroecological practices in order to maintain the natural supports of production, like the soil, for example.
I understand agroecology as maintenance of the soil. I'm in favor of zero-tillage agriculture, where no plot is used for soil cultivation. I also use a multi-species cropping system, which makes it possible to keep an agricultural field green for 365 days per year. Due to climate warming, the autumn and spring periods these days tend to be longer. The method of zero-tillage is a way of growing crops from year to year without disturbing the soil through tillage, just protecting the soil from leaching of nutrients. In this field, I harvest crops with a cutter. It means that I only harvest the grains, winnowing them from the upright stems, which are later pressed to the ground with a roller. Such a method enables to carry out an anti-erosive function of the soil by protecting it from soil leaching and ensuring moisture preservation. There are continuous processes going on within the soil, regardless of the season, be it autumn, winter or spring. What we need in the soil is the coexistence of altogether a live plant, which is a supplier of sugar, and the dead plant, such as pathogenic fungi. In such a way, equilibrium is formed between the so-called good and bad guys. If the dead matter starts to accumulate, like, for example, during tillage, all processes stop, spores emerge, and destruction starts. It's imperative to maintain the positive balance in the soil. A multi-species cropping system is a complex system of cultivated and uncultivated plants. Cultural plants have to be integrated in such a way that some of them are regarded as primary crops and the other crops serve as auxiliary ones. Crops tend to carry out an overrunning function in such a way help each other grow. My plan for the future is not to leave any debt to my grandchildren. I am talking about the soil-related activities. The situation could be compared to the recipe of making soup. Even if the same ingredients are used, the taste of soup made by two hostesses will differ. However, I always use one basic ingredient. That is, I add a touch of love to whatever I do.
In order to develop agroecological practices, it is important to know how the agrosystem works and what the interactions between the different elements, soil, plants, animals, and so on, are. Austria has a strong organic farming tradition in which we find agroecology at different levels, such as research and social levels. At the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, researchers work on new practices to enhance the link between plants and soil and the role of semi-natural habitat into an agricultural system.
Agroecology in Austria is mainly about, on the one hand, biodiversity, functional biodiversity, and on the other side, especially in organic farming, it is on nutrient cycling and closing cycles on the farms. Functional biodiversity, it's mainly on pest control, on the one hand by beneficials, and on the other hand pollination by honeybees and by wild bees. For testing the efficiency, the effects of natural structural elements like hedges, like weed strips, like grass strips, we do some testing of the vegetation in these landscape structures. They test the fauna, and also they are testing the effect into the fields, how far the effect is reaching. For example, there's organic pea growing, and for these peas there's in many years usually some problem with aphids, and there's this potential of beneficials coming inside the fields from the margins, from the field strips, from the hedges, and they control the peas, and in some years this is very effective. And regarding the other aspect, which is mainly important in organic farming and low input farming systems, it is about closing nutrient cycles, especially on the farms without livestock, stockless organic farming, where the nutrient cycles are not closed and nutrients are exported with the commodities, with the products to the cities. especially here in Austria, there's this approach of source-separated collection of compost, which means already at the very beginning of the chain in the cities there's a separation of the organic material and the rest of the waste, and only the organic material then is prepared as compost from the cities, and this is controlled for pollutants, and then if it's okay can be applied to the farms.
It is important to think of agroecology at different levels: field, farm and region. The farmers have to see agroecology as an additional source of income, producing not only high-quality food, but also high-quality landscape and environment. In Austria, agroecology can be approached with a technical point of view, and it's really linked to organic farming. But the social aspect is also important, for example, with a strong relationship between producers and consumers, as at Adama Biohof.
Adama is an organic agriculture situated in the Machfeld, close to Vienna, and produces organic vegetable. And in order to keep a large diversity of plants and a large diversity of crops that we grow, we soon started to direct market to customers in the greater area of Vienna with a boxing scheme. And this gives us the possibility to have diverse products that we bring directly to the households and to the people, and also have this diversity on the fields that keeps the agroecological system very stable, and also gives us the possibility to have legumes in our crop rotations to bring nutrients and organic matter to the soil. Adama Biohof in 1997 converted to organic agriculture, and soon they had the question how to sell all the diversity they produce on their organic farm to the customers. We deliver about 5,000 customers every week in the greater area of Vienna with these organic boxes ranging from organic vegetables directly from our fields, also up to bread or meat or milk products that we get from farmers in the area around us. So this is kind of a link from Adama Biohof to the customers directly, as also a link from other farmers in our area directly to customers instead of marketing over supermarkets, for example. Here at Adama, we use and produce renewable energy in terms of electricity. So we have photovoltaics here on our farm on the roofs, about 100 kilowatts peak, and we produce about 70% of the electricity that we need here ourselves. This is a future goal and vision of us here at Adama to make people more aware how important it is to eat organic farmed food, and to become available also for people who have today the issue that they don't get it easily.
In this example, the different approaches of agroecology highlight the developed practices and knowledge to produce high-quality food, and the importance to alert customers on the actual food and environmental issues. Thanks to the public policies, farmers create groups or associations to set in place innovative practices and rethink the production systems together.
Emergence Bio is an association of producers started in 2015 on the Millevaches plateau in the center of France at an altitude of 900 meters. The group is an association of fruit producers. All of the produce is organic. Our goal was to produce food sustainably. To this end, we have constructed a mechanizer. We had to face the construction and startup of the mechanizer, a distribution system, dryer and storm water recovery and treatment system. The methanizer allows the recovery of energy, heat and nutrients from animal manure and agricultural residue. The methanizer also facilitates and increases the recovery of nutrients as the digestate final product of methanization process is used as a fertilizer on our crops and prairies. It is recovered in our project, and the use of this it enables the creation of new local jobs and activities such as market farming and poultry raising. As the food processing activity is shared among us, we have optimized its use so that all of our produce can be transformed on site. It is reducing transportation, environmental impact and cost. The resulting produce is either directly eaten in your local restaurant or sold locally directly to consumers. Our plan for the future is to work to adjusting the system, especially our agricultural practices. We also want to make our project accessible to the people, to promote agroecology and circular economy.
Thanks to the group, it's easier to innovate, change the system and take risks. Another goal of those groups is to show the innovations and to communicate about it among the other farmers so they can develop it too. Depending on the country, agroecology can be related to innovative practices in order to produce with nature and preserve it, to a formalization of traditional practices, and to a science helping to understand how the agroecosystem works.
Within an ecosystem managed by farmers, we can meet a lot of interactions between physical elements like soil, for example, and living beings like microbes, animals, domestic animals and wild animals, and vegetations, wild plants and crops, and so on. When taking account the result of agroecology, farmers, when they implement their own farming systems, try to diversify their cropping system, their animal raising systems. They try to associate them. They can, for example, associate cropping systems with animals raising systems. They can combine trees with annual crops. And when combining trees with annual crops, they can raise mycorrhiza fungus, for example. They try to, for example, produce manure and use this manure in order to fertilize their soil by biological means. When implementing this kind of farming system, farmers try to improve the biodiversity within the soil with more bacteria, more useful fungus, more earthworm, and more humus in the soil. And the soil becomes more fertile without chemical inputs. Without implementing chemical inputs, farmers can protect, can preserve the biodiversity of the agroecosystems. They can preserve the beneficial insects, the useful insects, for example, bees, ladybugs, chrysops, and so on. This kind of agroecological farming systems can reduce green gas emissions, and they can also enhance the carbon sequestrations within soils. When confronting this more hazardous climate, farmers have to implement more resilient farming systems. That means more diversified farming systems. And these more resilient farming systems can help farmers to face the price volatility. So it's very important to teach agroecology because the challenge is help the young generations to implement this kind of farming systems, the agroecological farming systems, not like the industrial agriculture like before.
Concerning agroecology, farmers have to think at the system level to include all the elements and the interactions. To teach agroecology, it is important to let the people study their environment, experiment by themselves, and develop their own systems. Agroecology is not just a science and innovative practices. It can be related to an evolution of the way of life linked to nature. Moreover, there is also an evolution of the food production and distribution systems to include the wishes of the consumers, like full self-sufficiency, for example. There is a social aspect linked to this topic.
So for us, for La Via Campesina, at least for La Via Campesina Europe, which is a broad network of peasant farmers organizations, agroecology is a way to confront the multiple crises we are in right now. Right now we are in a social crisis, we are in an ecological crisis, we do have the climate crisis, and to confront those crises we need a different model of production and a different system how we produce food. Agroecology is not just a set of techniques how to produce food, it's much more. For us it's a transformation of the system, it's a way of change. Agroecology is for us understood as part of a broader concept called food sovereignty, and it's basically the right of peoples, so not just of people but of peoples, to decide themselves how food should be produced, how food should be distributed, by whom, for whom, and for whose needs we produce this food. We try to have or to reach not just food that's produced, good food that's produced for everybody and to a price everybody can afford, but it's also contributing to global justice, global social justice. Basically, it's about taking the needs of peoples into the center of the food system.